Hello again. It's been a long time since the last lore I made for BFDI BFB and you guys seem to want more lore. So here you go, but it's not the second Goiki War like some you've asked, as that is still in development. This will take place during and after the Great Goiki War, taking place in a country that was unbeknownst to you, Sonturnan. So anyways, please enjoy. Before the Civil War, Sonturnan used to be a monarchy that was ruled by the royal family known as the Selenors for many years to 1753 to 1913. During the royal family's reign, it was a very corrupt nation, with massive famines that starved many, high crime rates, and had an unfair feudal system. Because of this, it was a very underdeveloped nation compared to the others in Goiki, although it had a decent military which is comparable to Grinhilla before the Great Goiki War. The country has mostly tundra environments with a few plains and forests covering a third of Sonturnan in the north, and is known for its highest mountain ranges in Goiki. Because of the rising corruption in Sonturnan, this led to the birth of two parties on the 15th of March, 1910, the Constitutional Loyalist Party and the Sonturnan Utopian Party. At first, both parties had mutual relations, but had different ideas for the royal family, since the Loyalist Party wants to keep the Selenors as a figurehead, while the Utopian Party wants to remove the royal family entirely. This is another reasons why the two parties are distant and had growing tensions between them since. With the creation of the two parties, fearing that their power was under threat, the royal family tried to shut the two parties down to still be in control. This led the Sonturnan objects to be outraged, and on the 24th of June, 1913, many Sonturnans began to riot throughout the city of Tundra Hills, and when things began to go out of control, the military were sent as riot control to clear out the rioters, but this caused even more trouble as many soldiers mutinied as they do not want to shoot their families or loved ones, and without knowing, Sonturnan was slipped into a revolution. During the revolution, the two parties decided to work together and happily joined and aided the revolution by forming their own militia to fight Sonturnan soldiers called the Sonturnan Revolutionary Legions, which were made up of ex-militaries and deserted Sonturnan soldiers. The legions were first sent on the 27th of June 1913 and quickly outmatched the low-morale Sonturnan military. Finally, on the 28th of June, the revolutionaries surrounded the Nivozo Palace where the royal family were seeking shelter. The siege lasted for 5 hours until the royal family had no choice but to step down, ending the revolution. After the revolution, the royal family was stripped down from power to be just ceremonial figureheads and would be under the control of the loyalists. They would later be all executed 23 years later. After the revolution, the two parties immediately split and dividing the nation up to the Sonturnan Alps. The loyalists had the west where it was more modernized and agricultural, and the utopians had the east where it was more urban and barren but had a population that favored the utopians. During the year before the war, both nations already had high tensions as each nations wanted to unite Sonturnan with their own governments. After a year of strengthening, with also Piconui secretly supplying them weapons and equipment, the Utopians were the first to attack. On the 26th of March, 1915, Utopian soldiers charged into Loyalist territory with all their might. Without warning, the Loyalists were caught in a surprise attack and were not prepared for battle, taking heavy casualties and being pushed back in the north. Although the Utopians were successful invading the north, the south was a different story. While the Utopians were busy invading the north, the Loyalists quickly made defenses around the capital, so when the Utopians attempted to invade the capital city, they were met with intense resistance of bullets and artillery from Loyalist soldiers who, despite being not ready for war, they were determined to protect their capital city with all they had. causing the Utopians to lose more than 23,000 men in the first invasion. Despite the invasion in the south unsuccessful, the Utopians kept going and rerouted 30% of the troops in the north to the south. They will later fail 3 more invasion attempts in 3 months, which has given enough time for the Loyalists to mobilize and were ready for battle, and changed the tides of the war. With enough supplies and men mobilized, on the 14th of June, 1915, Loyalist soldiers began to take back their land in the north and later push back the now weakened Utopian forces further and further into their own territory, until a problem emerged that blocked the Loyalists' way, the infamous Sonturnan Alps. The Sonturnan Alps are well known for its impressive heights and unusual terrain, which acts as a natural barrier for the Utopians, and not only that. They've built hidden bunkers and trench systems all around the mountain ranges to strengthen it even more, earning the nickname, the Great Tundra Wall. Despite the dangers in the Alps, Loyalist troops began to push up through the Alps, quickly met with gunfire and barrages from the Utopians, and this was the start of their long mountain warfare. For the entirety of the war, the both sides were stuck in a massive stalemate, as Loyalists slowly push and defeat enemy defenses while they meet heavy resistance by Utopian guerrillas retaking their own defenses, and because of the uneven terrain, supplies were limited and many soldiers began to die from starvation and hypothermia until airplanes were introduced in the war a few months later. While planes were also used in the Great Goiki War, they were mostly used for reconnaissance and were not equipped with weapons. The major use of airplanes was in the Sonturnan Civil War, as where the first fighter planes and bombers were invented. Their first use in the war was in the 5th of August, 1915, by the Loyalists, as to bomb strategic Utopian points to make way for its ground forces, and since anti-air weapons didn't existed back then, the Utopians had no way to fight back Loyalist bombers. So, to protect their own strategical points, this encouraged the Utopians to create the first fighter planes to counter-attack Loyalist bombers. Throughout the Sonturnan Civil War, air support had a major role in both sides since it allowed new ways to supply troops and fight. After 3 years of a painful stalemate in the Sonturnan Alps, nothing changed as the both sides were still fighting an endless fight. Starvation was high, and morale was low for the both sides, causing many soldiers to desert. It was even worse for the Utopians, as a year ago Pikonui, an ally that they relied for aid and support, stopped supplying them as to rebuild their army after the end of the Great Goiki War, leading with Utopian soldiers heavily undersupplied and deserting in mass. Realizing that the battle going nowhere but an endless loop, on the 12th of March, 1918, both sides agree on signing an armistice but never a peace treaty to finally end the civil war. Many lives were lost, almost 830,000 of them were lost for nothing, just cogs for a useless machine. After the war, both nations will remain divided for another decade. The Loyalist side remain a democratic nation, while the Utopian side becomes a dictatorship, where it was stricken with poverty and crime, like if the Selenors never stepped down. After the UCGN was formed a year later, both nations joined the party, but the Utopians soon left the party after 3 years.